Choosing a topic is often the hardest part about public speaking. But like a good investigative journalist, here's what you can do. Look out at the world around you, ask a question, go out and research it, and then come back and talk about it. Stacey Turnbull has done exactly that in her informative speech.
I recently read the book Fast Food Nation, and in it I read about people who work in terrible working conditions. They get exploited, they have injuries, it's really bad. And then there's farmers who have to sell their goods at prices way below cost because big corporations control the market. And that's the only way they can sell their goods. And so they go bankrupt, they lose their lands. And I also read about people who are struggling to survive on minimum wage. And all this is happening in this country. And as I read that, I just thought, what's it like for people in poorer countries? Well, they don't have a government system like we do. And that's when the notion of fair trade just kind of popped into my head. And I thought, I don't really know much about it. Like most of you have heard the words, don't know what it's about. So I Googled it, and 7 million websites popped up. And I'm going to use 2 of them. The first is fairtradefederations.net. And that's a website that tells you all about fair trade and the products you can buy. The second is fairtrade.net. org. Fairtrade.org.
While fulfilling her ethical responsibility and citing her web sources, Stacey makes a small error. But she knows her information well enough and is listening to herself speak. She stops, corrects it, and moves on.
And it tells you about what it means to be a fair trade company, which is what I'm going to talk about today. But I learned that in fair trade, there's producers, small farmers, who grow their goods, they sell it to fair trade companies, who then in turn either sell it to you and I, or they sell it to wholesale buyers, who then sell it to you and I in finished products.
PowerPoint isn't the only option for your visual support. Some of the old-fashioned types work just as well. You could use a 3D model, an overhead transparency, or even a poster board, like Stacey has done here.
And one example of this is sugar. They'll have small farmers who grow their sugar, they harvest it, sell it to the fair trade company, who then either package it and sell it to us as sugar, or they package it and sell it to wholesale buyers, who then sell it to us as in the form of candy, chocolate, cookies, any of that stuff. So there are 3 things a fair trade company has to do before it can be considered fair trade. The first is it has to establish a long-term agreement with the producer. The second, it has to provide financial assistance to the producer. And third, it has to pay a fair price for the goods. So first of all, it has to establish a long-term agreement. This means that they will agree to buy their goods from one producer for the next 5 or 10 years. So in capitalism, everything is based on competition. So if Jonathan here owns a chocolate factory, and I'm selling sugar for 20 cents a pound, and Ginny's selling it for 10 cents a pound, Jonathan's going to buy it from Ginny because that way he can make the most profit.
Examples are a great way to make your point. You can actually double the value of that example too. Like Stacey, think about incorporating individual audience members into the example. It'll draw them in and keep them listening.
Well, if he was a fair trade company, he would have an agreement with me and he'd buy it from me, even though mine's is 20 cents and Ginny's is 10 cents. He'd buy it from me because he's agreed to. And for the next 5, 10 years, he'll buy it from me. Even if my price goes up and Ginny's goes down, he'll buy it from me. And in return, I will promise him that my goods will be of a high quality standard. And this will provide me financial stability because I know that I'm going to have an income. I know that for the next 5, 10 years, I'm going to have a check coming in. So I can invest in my company, I can invest in my business, I can buy tools, I can send my kids to school and hire workers. And Jonathan, in return, as well as getting this high quality standard goods, he also has stability because he doesn't have to shop around for a buyer. He can just get it from me every time. And any problems that arise, we can talk them through because we'll have this relationship. Now the second criteria, number 2.
Transitions take your audience from one idea to the next. New public speaking students sometimes struggle with them. Stacy, however, gives a great one here in her speech. Watch and learn.
Is that that as a fair trade company, you have to provide financial assistance to that producer. And this can come in 2 forms. Either one, you can provide them with a loan, because in developing countries, people don't have access to loans. There's no government programs. There's no banks just around the corner that you can walk to. You have to get it from somewhere, and there's nowhere you can get it from, apart from these fair trade companies. And what they'll do is they'll give them a loan with no interest, very low monthly payments, and if they miss a month, it's okay. They give them some leeway. So if they have a bad month, they're not going to come down on them and jack up their interest or foreclose their land. Doesn't matter though. They'll give them that month free. Now the third criteria. Oh wait. Actually, this financial assistance means that they're providing the capital for the company, for the business, so that they can get on their feet. Now to the third one. The third one. They promise to pay a fair price for their goods. So basically, if it costs me $80 to raise my crop, but the market price is only $60, instead of selling it for that and losing that money, a fair trade company will come in and say, look, it cost you $80 to raise this. I'm going to give you $80 for it. But more than that, I'm going to give you $90 so that for that extra money you can have to buy the things that you need. Now the cost, the $80, covers the cost of production, which means you can meet your basic needs. You can eat, you can have clothes, you can have your livelihood. The extra $10, well, that means that I can invest that into my business, or I can keep that as a profit so that by the time next season comes around, I'm not going to need that the advance payment that I had the first time. No, I'm already on my feet. I'm solid. Now, in case any of you fell asleep, which I'm sure you might have by now, the 3 criteria that a fair trade company has to meet. 1, has to establish a long-term agreement. 2, has to provide financial assistance. 3, has to pay a fair price for the goods that they buy. So the next time you're in Starbucks and you see the coffee with this fair trade logo on it, you'll know what it means. And whether you buy it or not, doesn't matter. At least you'll know what your choices are.